This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present Dr. Paul Edward Farmer for the degree Doctor of Science.
Paul Edward Farmer, healer, humanitarian, teacher. Moved by a gospel-centered imperative to serve the poor and a doctor's kit filled with simple instruments, great intellect, and greater still compassion, you cure the sick. You visit the imprisoned and bring hope to countless men and women in despair. Along the way, you have effected a revolution in our understanding of how to loosen the death grip of AIDS and tuberculosis among impoverished people. Your work inspires others to emulation. Your spirit of service, focused on persons while transforming communities, gives courage to those who would follow your example. With gratitude for your steadfast vision and for your extraordinary wedding of the heart and the mind, we bestow on you the degree of Doctor of Science, honoris causa. At this time, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Farmer to deliver our keynote address.
Thank you. Now that wasn't too hard to say, President Wagner. Let me start at the beginning. Congratulations, class of 2007. And lest we forget, happy Mother's Day. I mean, let me just ask you all to stop and think a second where you'd be without your mamas. Now, forgive me if I'm a little bit intimidated about being your commencement speaker. Where are the undergraduates, by the way? There you are. I consider it a great honor, of course, but you have to admit there's been a fair amount of flack about this part of the festivities. Now, I'm accustomed to being second choice, and I don't mind losing out to major contributors to higher education, such as, say, Will Ferrell or The Rock. Sometimes it's surely better to be in second place. One year, I'm told, it was me or Condi at BC. And the fact that I went first is probably why she's never asked me to come work at the State Department. And look at the mess they're in over there. In any case, friends here have sent me copies of the editorials and letters to your campus newspaper, The Wheel. So I know that Emory is at least polite about such matters as who should give your commencement address. When the president of George Washington University was announced as a speaker, I read, again in The Wheel, that he, and I quote, was labeled a con artist and a spawn of Satan on Facebook groups created to protest his decision. At Emory, students maintained their respect for President Wagner while protesting his decision. The Emory administration was also able to respond to student concerns with a greater deal of success. Commencement at George Washington will continue without a keynote speaker. That's true. I'm quoting from the Emory Wheel, which could never be wrong, right? And Emory, on the other hand, this is still from The Wheel, was able to recruit an outside speaker, Paul Farmer, who, while not widely recognized by students, at least fits the ideals of the university he will be addressing. End of citation. Where are the medical students? You guys better have my back, is all I can say. And where's Rollins, anyway, in all this? There we go. Anyway, so here I am, not widely recognized by anyone, it would seem, and not as appealing as a big-name celebrity or a political figure. By the way, last night I was hanging around with some students who told me that in order to raise my profile here at Emory, that they purchased, with the help of the administration, 2,000 copies of a book that I didn't write, but in which I figured prominently. And they told me they actually borrowed a golf cart and drove around the campus And even, they shouldn't have told me this, they said they went to Frisbee mat games, ultimate Frisbee. And I had this image of them going around in a golf cart with the book saying, hey, free books. And the Frisbee players going, dude, what about this doctor? Okay, we'll come. Anyway, even the wheel hopes that I might have something useful to impart, and so far has been kind enough not to publish any Facebook commentaries suggesting that it is I who am the spawn of Satan, and that's good news for me. Good news for you. My remarks will be brief, contain a true story with a plot line, and attempt to reflect some of the ideals that Emory, as much as any American research university, is attempting to cultivate. And though you can't please everyone at commencement, and just look around you at the diversity of interests and values all around you, I will try to avoid focusing only on the dreary topics in which I, alas, have some expertise. But don't worry, I wouldn't know how to give a speech without referring to runaway epidemics and to pestilence in general, to war, racism, and other sorts of violence. I wouldn't know how not to speak about the people I've met by being a doctor. But following the rules of commencement addresses, I will seek to refer to these horrors in a cheerful way. Also, in keeping with the rules, I won't talk about Virginia Tech or gun control. I won't talk about religion or politics, at least not a lot. I will scarcely mention global warming. But what then are the ideals of the university I will be addressing? Why was I invited here? Since the creation and dissemination of new knowledge through research and teaching, a big part of my job, are taken as givens in a research university and a bit ho-hum for commencement, I'm hoping I was chosen because of my interest in the university's role in service beyond its walls. This university has promised to advance an agenda that links the development of new knowledge to the betterment of the world. It can and it should. With the CDC, CARE, the Task Force for Child Survival, the Carter Center practically on the premises, the possibility for service, both local and global, is almost limitless. It's perhaps this proximity that has led Emory to ask important questions about the role of a research university in a world riven by violence and the persistent and complex plagues I deal with in my day job as a doctor in Haiti or Africa or Boston. Mission statements promising to promote such ideals are easy. Making them happen entails great struggle. How do we set priorities? Well, we have to look back and to look forward. It's another rule of graduation speaking that one should never, ever use a Latin turn of phrase or refer to the classics. That was outlawed, by the way, in 1962 by a Supreme Court decision. Now, I'm going to cheat and quote Cicero, and he wrote, "Not to know what happened before one was born is always to be a child." Others have commented that as a people, Americans are short-memoried. Now, I'll confess right here that I have no memory of anything that was said at my college graduation. And of course, I'm worried you're going to forget my comments by tomorrow, which would be better than being labeled the spawn of Satan on Facebook. So I'm going to try to keep this straightforward and tell the story of one family's struggle. Now, this is a story about courage and commitment, friendship and generosity. It's a story about immigration to this country, and it links, in no more than a dozen years, 4 very different countries. It's a story that leads from Haiti to the United States, via Guantanamo, where we have a military base, and then on to Iraq. 4 countries, 12 years. I said I wouldn't be talking about the war much, and I won't. I said I wouldn't talk too much about disease and violence, and I won't. I'll focus on a courageous and generous young man whom I'll call Joe, since he's still in Iraq. He's 24. He's about the same age as many of you graduating today. I've told his mother's story before, but never his before today. I met Joe because of a 1991 coup in Haiti, where I'd been working since graduating from college. Joe's parents were poor, but able to read and write and interested in service to others. They were involved in a mass literacy movement that had taken root in Haiti about the time of that country's first democratic elections, which occurred in December 1990. 7 months after a landslide victory brought a liberation theologian to the presidency, a violent military coup brought an end to democratic rule in Haiti. The ensuing repression was fearsome. Refugees streamed out of the cities and into the hills, over the border into the Dominican Republic, where they were unwelcome, and onto the high seas. Of course, no one desired to leave home, least of all a young couple with 2 small boys. But on April 27, 1992, Joe's mother, Yolande Jean, was arrested and taken to a police station. She was pregnant with her 3rd child, was beaten, miscarried, and decided that, should she survive, that she would flee the country, which she did shortly thereafter. Her husband remained in hiding, and she never saw him again. The next part of the story brings in 2 more of the 4 countries, the United States and Cuba. Why Cuba? Because that's where a Coast Guard cutter, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter, took Yolande. She told me, "I took the boat on May 12th, and on the 14th they came to get us. They did not say where they were taking us. We were still in Haitian waters at the time. We thought they might be coming to help us. There were 6 children on board. On the 14th, we reached the base at Guantanamo." Haiti was full to overflowing with people like Yolande Jean. Soon, Guantanamo was full to overflowing as well. On May 24th, 1992, at which time, I might add, I was a young American physician, just having finished not too long previously my own training. On May 24th, 1992, President Bush issued Executive Order number 12,807 from his summer home in Kennebunkport, Maine. Referring to the Haitian boats, he ordered the Coast Guard to, and I quote, "to return the vessel and its passengers to the country from which it came, provided, however, that the Attorney General, in his unreviewable discretion, may decide that a person who is a refugee will not be returned without his consent," end quote. As an attorney for the Lawyers Committee for Human Rights, Riley observed, "Grace did not abound. All Haitians have been returned under the new order." Not all were returned. Yolande was among that small number who, deemed political refugees, were also found to be positive for HIV. I won't go through her story today, which is too painful for a celebration, but suffice it to say that she was stuck on a military base against her will. The plight of the Haitian refugees became enough of a cause célèbre during the 1992 elections to spur the candidates Clinton and Gore in their official platform to call for an end to the forced repatriation of Haitian boat people and to the detention of HIV-positive refugees on Guantanamo. I'm for that, I thought, taking heart, for I was disturbed by the reports coming out of the base there. But the camps were not closed down until federal judge Sterling Johnson heard the case brought against the U.S. government by the Haitians and their advocates. The more depositions he heard, the more convinced he became that the detention of the HIV-positive Haitians represented cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th Amendment of our Constitution. In his 1993 ruling on the case, Judge Johnson described Haitians detained in Camp Bulkley as follows, and I quote from his decision. "They live in camps surrounded by razor-barbed wires. They tie plastic garbage bags to the sides of the building to keep the rain out. They sleep on cots and hang sheets to create some semblance of privacy. They are guarded by the military and not permitted to leave the camp except under military escort. They are confined like prisoners and are subject to detention in the brig without hearing for camp rule infractions." End quotation. Yolande was eventually released along with the others and came to the United States. I visited her and other Haitian refugees in New York and Boston after this particular ordeal was over. When I first met Joe, he was about 12, his brother 10. I mostly talked to their mother and seemed to recall that they found it more absorbing to talk to my brother, who was then a professional wrestler with World Championship Wrestling. You laugh, but this is true. He was thus himself a resident of this city and a frequent visitor to Emory. Some of you, not the undergraduates, but some of you in graduate school, G27 or whenever. How long does it take to get through graduate school these days? Some of you will recall that whenever I'd come here to give a talk, my brother, who is, the size of a Brahma bull, would get all the attention. I mean, I'm not jealous. I think he looks like a freak. But anyway, the Haitians look at him and say, same mother, same father? A decade went by, and I confess I didn't think much about Joe. And this is the part to remember. But just before Christmas 2005, I received, via a close friend of his, a check in the amount of $250. Joe said he wished to support the work of our group, Partners in Help, in Haiti, and to help us one day in serving the destitute sick there. I was grateful for the contribution, for we certainly needed help in Haiti. What struck me most, though, was that Joe was in Fallujah. He joined the Marines and been sent to Iraq. I wrote back to him and we stayed in touch through email and once in a while by phone. So I guess those Halliburton call centers do work. It's probably cost $7,452 per minute to you, the taxpayers. To you, the taxpayers. We're the parents, anyway. There you are. For a year, we corresponded almost every day, just by email. But we didn't talk much about the war or his daily reality. He took great pains to let me know that by the time I began inquiring anxiously about his safety, he no longer went out on missions, as he put it, beyond the wire. He was instead responsible, and is responsible, for supplying another group of Marines out on patrol. He didn't say much over email about his activities, noting only how relieved he felt when his guys returned safely to the forward operating base in Fallujah. More often than not, he'd tell me that I was the one who needed to be careful, since he knew a lot about what was happening in Haiti. But I knew that, oh great, I'm missing a page in my sheet. You guys are probably thrilled. Carlos Del Rio, Doctor of Medicine, I'm going to kill you. He printed it for me. I'm kidding, though. Anyway, forget about the written page. I got to meet up with Joe, came on leave, and to meet up with his girlfriend and his little brother. And I said, I'll meet you anywhere in the United States. I'll buy you a nice meal. And I did. This is just a couple of weeks ago. And I thought maybe I was giving him the first red wine he'd had in a while. And we talked a little bit about his plans. And he told me, very straightforward manner, that he was planning to stay in Iraq in order to look after his mother, who he knew could fall ill at any time, to send his brother to a proper college, and to be able to buy a home and have a family. One of the things he said struck me. I want to look forward, not back. Very irrepressibly optimistic fellow. Now, some things we didn't discuss, including the fact that Joe is not yet a U.S. citizen. But we did discuss his little brother's plans. Whenever he had trouble making ends meet, Joe's brother thought about joining the military too. Do that only as a last resort, advised Joe. I'll find the money for you to finish college. There was so much left to talk about that we called each other every day during his leave. He's now back in Fallujah, and I spoke with him yesterday when he called me. So what exactly is this story about? What, as we used to say in medical school, is the take-home message? You guys still say that, don't you? Grumpily, I might add. Like, how much of this do we really have to know? You're hoping I'll stop talking about this, or the whole world here will know how much you complain about having to learn. Anyway, let me offer 3 take-home messages. I've already confessed that I don't recall any of the points made by my own class's commencement speaker, so you're forgiven in advance if you forget these 3. First, it's a story about connections. As you head off to lives full of promise, remember that the connections you've made here at Emory need to be sustained and nourished. I let Joe fall out of my life for a decade, and his mother and brother too. Thankfully, Joe's generosity brought us all back together. I won't lose track of them again. Friendship is too precious a gift. There are, of course, less sentimental connections visible in this story. I've written a lot about the intimate link between my country and Haiti, the hemisphere's 2 oldest republics. It's not the stuff of congratulatory addresses either. And I fear the connection between our country and Iraq will cause us grief. Fallujah is a case in point and is already a proverb. Just 2 weeks ago, one U.S. colonel in Anbar province, explained his approach to counterinsurgency, and I quote, this is from the colonel, "Fix Ramadi, but don't destroy it. Don't do a Fallujah." But what about our peculiar military base in, of all places, Cuba? Just last month, a friend of mine gave a talk about Guantanamo at Harvard. Here's his description of the place: a bay, a harbor, a hideout, a home, a military base, a sanctuary, a prison, an outpost on the threshold of nations where neither Cuban nor U.S. nor international law applies. Guantanamo Bay has been there all along. When the Taino Indians met Columbus, when Caribbean pirates preyed on the shipping of newly consolidated states, when Spain clashed with Britain, when the U.S. defeated Spain, when Kennedy confronted Castro, when George W. Bush set out to vanquish terror, to know Guantanamo is to know ourselves, as citizens, as a country, as individuals in a world of states. Guantanamo is a place outside, this is me again, Guantanamo is a place outside the reach of constitutional protections. So you might think of it as a place of disconnection, but the very disconnection connects you and me to that place and what is done there. I hope you will all take on the responsibility of remembering how closely we are connected to the things that should disquiet us. Remember Cicero's injunction about history as you go out from Emory into the world. Second, Joe's story, like his mother's, is for me a parable about the kind of country we want to live in. Look around you. Look at the way Emory looks today compared to the way it looked, say, only 50 years ago. You know probably that Emory was founded in the first half of the 19th century by people who owned slaves. But did you know that Emory was forbidden by state law from educating African Americans at the same time it enrolled white students? Did you know that it was only in 1962, when about half of those present today were already alive, that Emory brought suit against the state of Georgia and won the right to enroll students without regard to race? Emory's rise to greatness Emory's rise to greatness could not have happened, never, ever, without that struggle. Coca-Cola helped, but it takes more than great wealth to make a great university. It also takes great students. Who asked, how do you want Emory to look in the future? I have a friend, he's a journalist at CNN, lives right here in the city, and I asked him what points he thought I should underline here today. Every day he has to read about Iraq, shooting sprees on college campuses, crude comments from talk show hosts. It's about respecting people, he said, and reaching out to others. He paused a second and added, if everyone around you looks exactly like you, then there's something wrong. Although our elite universities are less homogeneous than they were a few decades ago, they remain islands of privilege, with far too few people like Joe. And although his younger brother has aspirations to attend a decent college, it's unlikely he could transfer here from the community college he now attends, especially given that he's working an almost full-time job on top of his studies. But still, look around you and wonder what this place would look like if we were not a country of immigrants. We ought to be celebrating this heritage with gratitude. But one can read in this month's Harper's Index that no fewer than 305 new U.S. anti-immigration groups have formed since 2005. What kind of place do we want our country to be? I ask this knowing that not everyone here is a U.S. citizen. Then again, neither is Joe, even though he's serving in Iraq. If you're here today, you are somehow part of this country, this great experiment in modern democracy. Granted, our nation's reputation is not impeccable. But until quite recently, the United States have often served as a beacon of hope in many parts of the world. How do we wish to be seen by others? Or, to refer again to the wheel, what are the ideas we hold dear? Do we want to have camps like those on Guantanamo? Do we want America to be a place known as violent at home, even on college campuses, and violent abroad? Or do we want to try and change even those hearts which, unlike the polar ice caps, show little signs of melting? That was my only reference to global warming, so you're over now. Third, finally, remember people like my uncomplaining, brave, and generous friend Joe. I know some of the reasons he's in Fallujah rather than Haiti or New York, and I think you do too. The forces that tore his family asunder and sent his mother to an HIV-positive concentration camp, to quote the judge, are not unrelated to those that would 10 years later lead him into Iraq, even if he himself focuses largely on issues such as family strife or economic necessity. If you're the praying sort, please pray for Joe and for all those souls who, regardless of nationality, now find themselves within the borders of Iraq. But the reason I mention Joe today is his generosity. This is the point I'd like to underline here at Emory. In the midst of all he's been through, he's still able to think about service to others, including people in the poverty-stricken country he has not seen since he was a child. Even in Iraq, Joe is still able to remember those less fortunate than himself. These are worthy ideas and not unrelated, I suspect, to the notion of service that Emory espouses. To what extent does Emory espouse such notions? Well, take the Global Health Institute, which was launched by friends of mine, anthropologists and doctors and public health specialists from across the university. It's as good an example of how a research university can link its strengths to service to the poor as any I can think of, and has the strong support of President Wagner and the Emory administration. I also have the good fortune of knowing some of the graduates here today. Others I have met or read about. Here among you, for example, is a young woman, Julie Rosenberg, graduating from the School of Public Health. Before even attending college, she worked for a year among some of the poorest children in urban Peru. She let these children and their families change her life. Although she's only in her mid-20s, Joe's age, she has for several years already raised funds and awareness on behalf of these families. Some of you have read about college seniors, Elizabeth Schultes and Robbie Brown. Liz has been working among street kids in Pune, India, and her notion of pragmatic solidarity was expansive enough to include building an orphanage. So when her classmate, Robbie Brown, formerly editor of the world's finest campus newspaper, was awarded a no-strings-attached $20,000 prize, he turned around and gave the entire amount to Liz for her work in India. Both of them may be tired about hearing their generosity praised, but what a marvelous example for Emory and for all of us. There are also important collectives represented here today, because Emory is a major site of basic research leading to drug development, and because some of these drugs are of obvious importance to people in my line of work, I am excited to know that Universities Allied for Essential Medicines is active here. Just how important this is clear when you learn, as I did from students at the Rollins School of Public Health, that 80% of today's prescriptions for AIDS medications include at least one drug covered by Emory intellectual property rights. How can we get these drugs for our most destitute patients? Allow me to quote from Emory's strategic plan. A destination university internationally recognized as an inquiry-driven, ethically engaged, and diverse community whose members work collaboratively for positive transformation in the world through courageous leadership in teaching, research, scholarship, healthcare, and social action, unequaled at translating medical breakthroughs into service and patient care. That's from the Emory Strategic Plan. There is, in your students and faculty, enormous promise for the world in which all of us must live, are privileged to live. The Wheel's recent editorial, I bet you the Wheel's never gotten so much play in a commencement speech. The Wheel's recent editorial about today's festivities concludes, "We hope the commencement ceremonies give our graduates a send-off to remember. I know I won't forget you are allowing me to share this day with you, and I am grateful for the chance to reflect about connections, about the need to think of the less fortunate, even from a place like Iraq, and about the need to keep alive the utopian ideals that would make this world a better place for all of us. I don't doubt that some of you in the audience today have reached this stage after a journey not unlike Joe's, a passage across national borders, over class lines, through hardship and adjustment. And it wouldn't surprise me to learn that Emory has inspired and shaped all of you, those who came here with all the advantages, no less than those who came here with few. This is part of the utopia that gives our country its meaning, that gives the university, based on research and teaching, its value. As you go forth from these extraordinary years of freedom and discovery, I ask you to keep alive in your minds the curiosity that brought you here, and to revive it from time to time by forging new connections to others who would have done well with the same opportunities had they been so fortunate. Congratulations on the outcome of your hard work, the support of your family and friends, your desire to improve, and thank you for the honor of sharing this day with you. God bless you all. Thank you.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.